How soon can I get back to full training after a running injury? Now, this is obviously not a super simple question, but today we're going to walk through our thought process behind how we progress runners back from injury and the speed at which we do that and the different factors that play into that so you can better understand how you might approach progressing your rehabilitation from your running injury. So to do this, we're going to use the example of Eric, one of our clients who was a guest on the show just a few episodes back. And if you recall, that was quite a good, fun episode. And what we're going to do is use Eric's experience as an illustration of different ramp rates and how they can impact someone's recovery journey. Now, just to recap a little bit, when Eric got into running a few years ago, he quickly fell in love and was running every moment that he had the opportunity. And this led to some issues with his IT band, which he managed to recover from. But then when he got back up to training again and was training for his first marathon that he'd registered for, he started developing anterior knee pain, which he had looked at, and it was determined that he had runner's knee or patellofemoral pain. And then, of course, he had people talking to him, telling him that running was bad for his knees, it's bad for his body, it's hard on him, he's going to do himself damage, he should probably stop running or run less. And this was starting to get to him. And it eventually led to him stopping. He quit running for a little while because he felt like he was maybe doing himself some harm and he couldn't seem to run without pain. And, Eric's young and he thought, well, I'll make the best of it. I can't run, but I'll do other things instead. But during that time that he took off running, he told me he felt like he lost a friend. Running had become a close friend to him in some way. And he felt like he'd lost someone close to him and he really missed it. He really missed having the structure and having the ability to decompress and clear his mind for a while after work. And he was really keen to get back to it. And as it happened, one day on the way home from work, he was listening to podcasts because he'd been searching for podcasts about knee pain and running. And at some point, he'd queued up one of our episodes of the Adaptive Zone podcast. And it was the interview we did with Jen quite a while back, where she'd had a lot of trouble with her knees, but was able to overcome that and get through and do the New York City Marathon. And this inspired Eric to reach out to me and book a free call. And we had a bit of a chat about his experience so far with running and the trouble he'd been having with his knee. Now, after that phone call and then a couple of others, because he wasn't quite sure, we decided that it would be worth working together to try and resolve his knee pain. And we got to work. We laid out his training plan in terms of the running that he needed to do and the strength training he needed to do. And we started to progress that week by week. And the progress was very, very slow. In fact, in the first month, Eric made very little progress and still had pain on every single run, even though he was only doing run walks. In the second month, Eric was able to run a little bit continuously, but he was still having pain on every run. By the third month, he was able to run for up to an hour if he took some walk breaks to allow him to run that long. And Eric was starting to get worried because the marathon was creeping up and he really wanted to do it, but he could see the trajectory of his progress was very, very slow. And we talked about this quite a bit because he was doubting the process. He wasn't sure it was going to work or whether we were doing the right things to make sure that we got rid of the pain. And quite a lot during those first 3 months, I had to reassure Eric that he was making progress and that he was doing the right things, but he needed to stick with the plan. And that's because Eric was improving. He was able to run more each week and each month than the one before, and he was able to do so with less pain. The trouble was that it was very small improvements and it was difficult to see, but you could see them. And what we were seeing was Eric was evidence of a slow adaptive capacity, meaning it was each time we would apply a stimulus to his body, the amount of improvement we would get in terms of resilience of the injured area and reduced sensitivity was quite small. So then we had to do it again a couple of days later. And this would add up to little bits of progress week on week, but it wasn't super quick and it was a little discouraging for him. Now, because different people are different in terms of their physiology and their genetics and their age and also and their circumstances, and because all injuries are different in terms of their severity and what types of injuries they are, there is no uniform formula that we can apply to know how much more we'll be able to do with someone in a month or 2 months if they have an injury. There's just no way to predict that because there are too many variables. Now, to accommodate this, to try and make sure that we stay in the adaptive zone and continue to progress, runners like Eric who are progressing more slowly, we look at something called the ramp rate. The ramp rate is a term that we use when we're working with runners to determine how fast we think we can progress them 1 week to the next and 1 month to the next. So if someone has an injury, we'll be trying to get them back to full training pain-free. And during that process, we'll have sort of 4 different ramp rates that we could use. We'll have a slow ramp rate, a medium ramp rate, a fast ramp rate, or a period of consolidation. Now, these are not well defined because some runners are only running a couple of times a week for a couple of miles, and other runners are running hundreds of kilometers a week. So we can't apply a specific amount to this, but what we instead look at is the rate of change. If we were to do a slow ramp rate, we would be running a little bit more at the end of a training block, which for us is 4 weeks. If we were to do a fast ramp rate, we would be running a lot more at the end of that period of 4 weeks. And then a consolidation block is something we use from time to time when we feel like a runner doesn't need to do less, but we don't want to progress them on. We want to sort of consolidate the improvements that they've made and keep them there for a period of time. So we might keep the volume and intensity of their training the same for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, just to let their body get used to it before we start to progress to the next level. Now, these different ramp rates allow us to stay within the adaptive zone. So if we have someone who's adapting slowly to the training like Eric and is improving, but his knee isn't getting tons better where he can run twice as much at the end of the month to what he could at the start, if it's not improving really quickly, then we want to follow his body's adaptive capacity. We want to stay within his adaptive zone, because if we try and push him on too quick, we're just going to irritate the area, make it painful, and he'll have to rest, and then he won't get back to where he wants to go with his running. But at the same time, if we just get someone to completely rest and not train at all, or to just train at the same level and not increase their volume and intensity, they will just stay where they are or get worse. So to find the adaptive zone where their body is adapting to the training, becoming stronger, more resilient, and less sensitive, we use these different ramp rates, and that allows us to stay within that adaptive zone and see progress week on week, month on month, even though sometimes it's slower than we would like. So the way we do that in the real world is we'll estimate a ramp rate based on a few different factors that I'll go through in a second. And we'll say this ramp rate is either going to be slow, medium, fast, or consolidation, depending on what we think the injured area can adapt to in that particular runner at that particular time. Then we'll plan out a week of training, and then we'll review the training during that week and see how their body's responding. How is the pain responding? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it tolerating the training, or is it irritating the area? Are they not feeling it at all? Can we progress quicker? Can we increase the ramp rate? These are the questions that we're asking ourselves as we're reviewing the data and the feedback from the runner on the back end. And then all we do is we adjust the training accordingly, adjust the ramp rate accordingly, and then progress on and on until the running gets back to the amount and the intensity of running that they want to do. Now, estimating the ramp rate, whether it's slow, medium, fast, or consolidation, is based on a lot of different factors, but you can largely group them into 2 groups, which will be those related to the runner themselves and those related to the injury. So if we go with the injury first, we have the nature, the severity, and the chronicity. So the nature would be, what exactly is the injury? How does the rate of progress of a tendinopathy compared to a muscle strain? A muscle strain is usually very fast to recover. A tendinopathy is usually very slow, right? So the nature of the injury matters. The severity of the injury matters. And we measure that by how disabling is the injury. So Eric's knee pain was patellofemoral pain. And by nature, patellofemoral pain is not a particularly nasty injury, but the severity was pretty bad for Eric. He couldn't run at all when we met him and hadn't been running for quite some time. So the severity of his injury was quite bad because he was unable to run, meaning he was quite disabled by it. And then the final thing is the chronicity, like how long has it been going on? And again, I don't remember the exact time, but Eric had been having this trouble for quite a number of months by the time we met. And anything that's been going on longer is always going to take longer and go slower to resolve than something that hasn't been there very long. Now, on the other side of it, we have factors related to the runner that can affect their ability to adapt, and then thus the rate at which they progress with their injury. So if we think about the runner, one thing would be the age of the runner. Now, Eric is fairly young, but he's not a teenager, right? If he were, then a teenager would be healing from this injury more or recovering from this injury more quickly because they have more adaptive capacity. Equally, he's not like a runner in his 70s or 80s. It's always going to go slower for older runners than it is for younger runners, but that's not the only factor, right? So another factor would be like the health. The healthier a runner is and the healthier their diet, their sleep, and all that kind of stuff is, the quicker they are going to adapt and recover from their injury. And the more unhealthy they are, so if it's someone who's getting injured as they get into running to try and lose weight because they're overweight and sedentary and have been for a long time and they're quite unhealthy, they're trying to get healthy by running, and then they get injured, they are going to adapt more slowly because they have a less healthy body. And if we take that and contrast it with someone who's, they've been running for 20 years, they're an extremely healthy, athletic person, but then they get an injury, they're going to recover more quickly because they have more adaptive capacity because their body is healthier. And then finally, it's like the lifestyle of the runner, both in the past and then definitely in the current situation. So if you take a couple of extremes, might be like a single mom who has two young kids and gets like no sleep and works full time, and she's really stressed. So she's going to adapt more slowly and recover from her injuries more slowly than someone like a 20-year-old woman who, just finished school and started a new job, but like doesn't have any other responsibilities, no kids, and sleeps well, right? So that person's going to have more adaptive capacity and recover from that injury more quickly. So these are the different factors that will determine the ramp rate. And what we were seeing with Eric is that he required a slow ramp rate. And that was mostly for him to do with the severity. So the pain was quite bad and it put him out of running for quite a number of months. And what was the other one? Sorry, the chronicity. So like he'd had it for a number of months and it was quite severe. I'd say the severity, like the fact that he couldn't run at all, were probably the two factors that were most influential on determining that he ended up needing a slow ramp rate pretty much the whole time we worked with him. And that's why he wasn't able to run a ton more at the end of his first month than he was at the end at the time he joined us. And then by the end of his third month, he was running like an hour, but he still had to have walk breaks. Now, it went well in the end, as if you caught the episode with Eric, we talked about by month 6, he was able to have logged enough training to get through the marathon. But in reality, although he had a wonderful day and he did get his first marathon, he should be extremely proud of that. His performance, he really struggled in the last few miles. That was because his training was so hampered by the injury. But the important thing to remember here is that Eric is now back to full pain-free training now. So he did get his goal. He got his first marathon. Now he's running pain-free. He's back to full training. He just ran a 10K PR a few weeks ago and won the local 10K that he was running in on Christmas. So he's back in a good place and his knee feels fine now. And now he can move on to run his second marathon in the spring, and he'll do much better because he won't have this interruption to his training this time because he's built that resilience and strength and technique that he needed to do in order to put himself in that position. And the point I wanted to make with Eric is that he talked about in the interview, and when we were working together, Eric was very frustrated with the slowness of his recovery, and he could see other runners in our community getting back to running much faster. And it was very discouraging for him because he was like, I'm putting in the work. I'm doing all the workouts. I'm doing all the runs. I'm doing exactly what I'm told, which he was. But what he really needed is at certain times during his recovery, he needed just someone to say, trust the process. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making progress. It's slow. You're on a slow ramp rate. We can't speed you up. No, we can't add more. No, we can't run faster. This is the rate at which your body is telling us it will adapt, and we can't go any faster than that. And I didn't decide that ramp rate, and neither did Eric. His body decided that's how fast I'm going to adapt. But it was getting steadily better month on month, week on week. So when you have a runner who is making progress with an injury, because running injuries can be very difficult to treat at times, and lots of runners quit running because they keep trying to come back from an injury and they keep getting hurt. And a lot of the time, it's not that they were doing the wrong stuff. It was that they were expecting it to go quicker than it is, and they didn't have the right ramp rate that was appropriate for their injury. They were going too fast in their recovery, whether guided by a professional or trying to do it themselves, or they were going too slow and they weren't progressing as quick as they could. Either way, the ramp rate wasn't right. So determining the right ramp rate is not an exact science, and it's a difficult thing to do, but it's a very important thing to do when you're looking at getting someone back from injury. And then the interesting thing is that the ramp rate can be dynamic. So for the first 3 months, our ramp rate with Eric was very conservative. It was slow. We only added a little bit more each week, a little bit more each run, a little bit more each training block. But in the fourth and fifth blocks, we were able to go to more like a medium ramp rate. We could go quite a bit quicker. And that's just what his body was telling us. It wasn't acting up the same way it was before. It wasn't responding so negatively to each run. And we can pay attention. We can listen to the body and say, okay, we can add a bit more. We can increase our ramp rate a little bit. And now Eric's on a fairly fast ramp rate because he's feeling fine and he's adapting to his training just fine. But at some point, like things will happen and we'll have to slow him down again. So it's always about being dynamic with the ramp rate in terms of how quickly you progress someone's training, depending on how the injury and the runner is feeling at the time. Now, if this is sounding a little bit like, I don't think I've been thinking about this. If you have like knee pain or Achilles pain or some kind of running injury and you're like, I really haven't been paying attention to my ramp rate. I haven't given it any thought. And I'm not sure that the person who's helping me has. So if that's the case, definitely it's really important. So one is start thinking about it. But two, if you want to talk to us, we'd love to help you find the right ramp rate so you can get back to running and keep running long term. So if you want to do that, just click the link in the description. As usual, we'll have a chat and see if we might be able to determine why you're not making the progress at the rate that you want to and see if we might be able to help you.